It's time for the Movie Raid movie review, and tonight I'm going to talk about Halloween Kills. Now, I know there's a lot of hatred about this film, specifically. I get it, and I agree with you guys on some of it. But my opinion is that there's several characters, meaning the victims, that have came back for this film, which I appreciate that, and I like that they included that, some of these victims that narrowly escaped Michael's grafts, basically. And of course, Michael Myers himself coming back and seeing how he is in this film. I always loved the kills. I've always loved the brutality of Michael Myers, including this film, including even in Ends as well. And I like the fact that Michael, when he gets messed up, like when he is totally just beating the crap out of, he kind of loses control, but he also gains power at the same time. So the more you beat the crap out of him, the more power he regains and regenerates and gets stronger and more evil, per se, as far as the darkness within him. And he gets right back up and he's ready to go. And, that'll be your last day, basically. And I felt that was a good highlight for this film, is that Michael Myers never was actually weak per se as a character, or shown as a victim, or anything different that we have not seen as Michael. Now, we've seen Michael in many different forms over the course of these Halloween films in general, leading up to this point. But I felt that this film had the most energetic aspect of things, the most energy as far as the kills go, as far as the drama, as far as goes the terror and suspense. Like, it felt like they really just kind of threw it all in your face. Like, you put you on a wild ride with Michael Myers. I mean, we see him mess people up. We see what happens to Michael later on in the film. I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't seen this movie. But I will say that the sheer brutality of Michael was like pretty much a big, thumbs up on that. I always appreciate that. But I also felt that this should have been the final Michael Myers film. This should have been the final Halloween film. Now, honestly, I felt that, there shouldn't have been any more Halloween films in general. Now, I understand that other people would think that, oh, well, they could have done this, they could have done that. There's so many different concepts that anybody could really, imagine that could have happened, but this is the scenario that we got for this film. Now, I love the cast. The cast is great. Anthony Michael Hall comes back. I love it. Awesome actor. And I like the fact that what they did, trying to bring some of the past elements into this as well, and I love that they changed up Michael's house in a way. And I love that, it's already been occupied. What I don't care for is, like, when you bring comedians or rappers and so forth, somebody that isn't exactly within that element of a horror film, especially when it's a classic horror slasher film, please don't do that. Please don't just throw them in there, because then that makes it comedic. That makes it very, cartoony. And Michael Myers is no cartoon, man. Michael Myers is not like, Freddy Krueger, who, likes to joke around with his victims and, then kills them. Now, again, I know some of you guys disagree with that, but to my opinion, I love it when Freddy just screws around with his victims, knowing the fact that he can actually kill them anytime he wants. But anyway, back to the subject. Michael is definitely no joke, but when you get, again, we get McDowell, or and other people involved with this, or McDonald's, excuse me. Tripping over my words, I'm sorry. When you throw in different types of characters that just really doesn't really belong per se, more of a cameo, it's okay. But, I accept that. Okay, I move on. But I felt that this film should have been the final of the films because you got Laurie Strode, and in my opinion, with Laurie Strode, this should have been done a long time ago. The character is so exhausted. Character-wise, Laurie Strode is already out of her mind. She is in constant fear, constant alert, constant on guard, everything imaginable. Like, she's been through the psycho ward. She doesn't even have a life. And Michael revolves around her life regardless if he ever was alive. And if he isn't alive, even if he wasn't alive, chances are she would have still been out of her mind, always doing the same thing she's been doing. But Laurie, who in this film plays Survivor, like basically G.I. Joe Survivor, and, she got a little bit smarter within this. And, of course, she has a family and whatnot. And, putting that in the equation of this, basically puts them in jeopardy, obviously, when it comes to Michael Myers. And I felt that there should have been a final stand between Michael and Laurie Strode in this film because of so much chaos we see later on. I'm going to talk about the hospital scene. The fact that, evil dies tonight. Remember that? The evil dies tonight. Now, I also find it funny, before I get to that point, I also find it funny that they mention about 40 years, he comes back and da-da-da. It's like, if this town is so afraid of Michael, you think they would have been better prepared by this? And like, did someone say, now it's been a minute, he's not coming back? Did anyone ever think about that? But no, apparently everyone's been in fear for this for decades. I'm like, what, did we just go back to My Bloody Valentine all of a sudden? Because they did that, But anyway, the hospital scene where all this chaos is going on, where they think that Michael's coming back to, take out Laurie Strode and cause, fear and kill over there. But we also realize that there's, escaped actual mentally challenged people, that are actually crazy in their own capacity, which we see that early in the film, a whole bus of these crazies, and Michael being a big part of this, and here we are, they're all over the place, and one of them eventually gets in town, but, and he's, basically assumed to be Michael, which many people would not even know, because they never actually seen his face, per se, except for the victims, not his actual human face, but the mask itself. So, we see all this chaos going on at the hospital scene. We see so much energy, so much of this and this. I mean, it is like off the charts type of craziness going on. And I love that kind of adrenaline for these types of scenes in this film. And there's quite a bit of them. And I love the battle scene. Like, where all the group of the town, where they finally get their little rebellion, little revenge. And, they take it out on Michael, and, I just love that. I love that, Michael gets back up, and he's, ready to take on everybody regardless, and he proves, once again, you can't mess with Michael, man, no matter how hard you try, and if, you better try it as hard as you possibly can to get rid of this guy, get rid of evil, and he really is evil. So, the suspense and all this energy and chaos within this whole film, I love it. I love that it dives a little bit on to the family itself, where they're, just kind of piecing together away. They just think that the grandmother, Laurie Strode, is so crazy that, they can't have a life of their own, and until Michael starts coming in, and then now they eventually start believing her. But back to Laurie Strode on the character, which I kind of went off the topic for a second, sorry. But Laurie Strode, this should have been the final battle between Michael and her, that as we see in Halloween Ends, because of how much was put into Halloween Kills. This should have been somewhere in between. Instead of Laurie just sitting in a hospital bed, with a knife wound, and we should have seen, her getting up, her preparing to go find Michael, because she's good at finding Michael. She knew where Michael was several occasions. She kept tabs on him. So it makes perfect sense why she could have gotten ready for a battle for Michael. Now, I'm not saying she should have been like, superhero or anything like that, but this would have been the final to end her nightmares if she survived, to end everything, to end the terror, end the fear, end everything that Michael put onto that town and everybody around it, and I felt that this should have been the final film. Now, as far as Halloween Ends, in comparison between this film and Halloween Ends, I'm not a big fan of Ends, to be honest, because of what they did with that. They just had some wannabe protege trying to be Michael Myers, trying to get a taste of that thrill and kill, and thinking that he's something more than who he is, and he can't figure out who he is, and, he kind of feels that kind of murderous rage or killer darkness or whatever on that film. But in this film, Halloween Kills, man, you have just so much going on. And even the soundtrack, I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack is top notch, and I think that's also a highlight that everyone should also take into, because it's creepy. My favorite part of it is when Michael is lurking around in the yard where the other guy is in the yard. He's climbing on that gated fence, the one with the pointed spikes on the end of it, and he basically gets impaled by the jaw from Michael, as you would see it in the film. Again, if you haven't seen this film, then I just spoiled that kill. But anyway, that music that kind of creeps up. I love it, and I love what they used to create that sound, to create that creepiness for Michael Myers, of how he kills and his stalking. I love it, and again, Michael can take a beating. I love that too. I love the fact that he may be human, he may be this, but he can take his beating. And yeah, I appreciate the end as well of this film. I mean, the ending of this film. And I'm not going to talk about the ending per se if you have not seen the ending of this film. But I will say, even the end of it, awesome impact of it, in my opinion. That was a nice little end for that, to set up for the next film. But that could have been a cool ending too. Now, the ending, which again, I won't go into details of the ending, but I will tell you what I would like to have seen if the Laurie Strode versus Michael from Ends was not included into Halloween Kills. Let's say that wasn't there first. Let's say they wasn't even involved in Ends. This would have been a perfect moment for that, to include Laurie Strode with a bottle of Michael, and then have that ending in Halloween Kills as we see. That would have been badass. That would have been a perfect end for this whole thing. Again, I'm not a fan of my Halloween Ends, of how they did that on the ending part of it, because to me that should have ended a long time ago. Not because they kept milking Halloween, the franchise itself, in my opinion. It's just because story-wise, there is really not much else left. I mean, you got Laurie Strode being the main focal point of this whole thing. Now, what are you going to do, man? You kill off Laurie, or do you kill off Michael? Do you kill both of them off? Who knows? But in this scenario, you have this, and you have the next scenario in Halloween Ends. And I felt that the ending from Ends should have been on Halloween Kills, because of all this what's going on. And I know I mentioned this before, but I think of so much energy and so much of what was going on, the kills, everything, it was just jam-packed, man. I thought that was the best in comparison to Ends. And I understand that people just didn't like how the whole thing of Halloween Kills was, and I understand everything. I understand the complaints, but in my opinion, if I were to ever really choose between Ends and Kills, which would have been the better ending for the whole franchise as a final end, it should have been Kills. It should have been a battle between Laurie Strode, and it should have been with Michael. and possibly a little interaction with the family members, trying to kill him too. That would have been cool too. But no, we got this, and if I were to give this out of a 10, I would definitely give it a 7 because of the fact that Laurie doesn't have a huge role in this. We just know that she's once again a victim. You might as well look at it. She's once again a victim again. She gets, stabbed, obviously, but here we go again. We've seen this before. We've seen Laurie being back in the hospital in the early films. And if you've seen the early films, you know what I'm talking about. And in this case, here we are. Everybody was expecting her to do something really, crazy and, do something brutal against Michael, but sadly, you're going to be disappointed. And I just felt that there should have been, the endings really that, in my opinion, should have been the final. As a whole on this film, I don't mind it per se, man. I mean, I dig it, and I also understand, what other people are complaining about. But to me, I don't have a problem with this movie per se. Now, as far as the entire franchise goes, well, that's a little bit different opinion. But for this particular film, this particular story, evil dies tonight. Well, it doesn't really die tonight because you made another sequel. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think that I'm wrong? Do you actually like it? Do you think it's the worst out of all of these? Do you think that there should have been something different with Michael in this film in comparison to Ends? Do you think this should have been the ending of this? Let me know in the comments.